Before there was a Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz, there was a man Hollywood almost erased from the story completely. In 1939, actor Buddy Ebsen landed what should have been the role of a lifetime. MGM had cast him in one of the most ambitious films ever made, a movie that would eventually become one of the most beloved classics in American history. He was going to play the Tin Man. The costume was built. The songs were rehearsed. Cameras were rolling. For Buddy Ebsen, it looked like the beginning of superstardom. But just days into filming, something started going horribly wrong. Every morning, makeup artists covered his body in metallic dust to create the Tin Man's silver look. Under the blazing studio lights, that powder filled the air around him. At first, Buddy ignored the coughing. Then came the cramps, the weakness, the terrifying feeling that he couldn't catch his breath. But in old Hollywood, actors didn't complain, especially not when they were working on a massive studio production. So Buddy kept going until his body finally gave out. One night, he was rushed to the hospital, struggling to breathe. Doctors placed him in an oxygen tent as aluminum dust coated his lungs. And while Buddy fought to recover, the studio made a decision that would change movie history forever. MGM quietly replaced him with another actor, res-hot the scenes, and moved on as if nothing had happened. For decades, most people never knew the truth. Millions watched The Wizard of Oz without realizing the original Tin Man had nearly died making it. And according to Buddy's daughter, Kiki Ebsen, what happened behind the scenes was far darker than most classic Hollywood fans ever imagined, because losing the role was only the beginning. After the incident, Buddy's career stalled. The studio downplayed what happened, describing it as a simple allergic reaction instead of toxic metal poisoning. The man who thought he was about to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars suddenly found himself pushed aside, struggling to find meaningful roles while the film that nearly killed him became a worldwide phenomenon. And that's what makes this story so fascinating, because Buddy Ebsen didn't disappear. Most people would have walked away from Hollywood after an experience like that. Some never would have recovered physically or emotionally. But Buddy kept going. Years later, against all odds, he reinvented himself and became one of the most recognizable faces on American television as Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. The same man Hollywood nearly destroyed ended up building a career that lasted more than 7 decades. But even then, the rumors never stopped. Questions about what really happened on the set of The Wizard of Oz followed him for the rest of his life. Was the studio covering up the truth? How serious was his condition? And how close did America come to losing Buddy Ebsen forever? Now, years after his death, his daughter is finally opening up about the painful reality behind one of Hollywood's darkest behind-the-scenes stories. And once you hear what Buddy Ebsen endured just to play the Tin Man, you may never look at the Wizard of Oz the same way again. For Kiki Ebsen, the story of her father was never just about fame, television, or old Hollywood glamour. Growing up, she knew Buddy Ebsen as a father first, a warm, thoughtful man who loved music, loved storytelling, and carried himself with a kind of quiet resilience that only made sense years later, after she began uncovering the full truth about what he had survived. After Buddy's passing in 2003 at the age of 95, Kiki began going through boxes, photographs, letters, and personal keepsakes collected over decades. Buried among those memories were pieces of a story that Hollywood had mostly reduced to a footnote. Newspaper clippings, production photos, personal notes, evidence of a chapter in Buddy's life that nearly changed the course of entertainment history forever. And the deeper she looked, the more shocking the story became. Long before the Beverly Hillbillies, before Barnaby Jones, and before Buddy became a television icon, he was one of the most gifted dancers in Hollywood. Tall, energetic, and instantly recognizable because of his unusual movement style, Buddy built his early career in vaudeville alongside his sister Vilma. The pair became successful performers during a time when Hollywood was desperately searching for fresh talent that could sing, dance, and command attention on screen. Studios quickly noticed him, and in the 1930s, Buddy began appearing in major films, often cast as the lanky, likable dancer with effortless charm. He shared the screen with stars like Shirley Temple and worked during a period when MGM was becoming the most powerful studio in the industry. By the end of the decade, Hollywood executives believed they had found the perfect performer for an ambitious fantasy film based on L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. At the time, nobody knew the movie would become legendary. In fact, the production was chaotic almost from the beginning. Costumes malfunctioned. Actors suffered injuries. The studio constantly changed creative decisions during filming. But Buddy saw the project as a huge opportunity. According to Kiki, her father believed the role of the Tin Man could transform his career forever. Originally, he had actually been considered for the Scarecrow. But MGM changed directions and cast Ray Bolger in that role instead, moving Buddy into the part of the Tin Woodman. Buddy accepted it enthusiastically. He worked on the character's stiff mechanical movements. He rehearsed songs and dance numbers. He wanted to make the Tin Man memorable. Then came the makeup. Today, movie makeup departments use advanced materials, strict safety standards, and digital effects. But in 1939, Hollywood often relied on dangerous experimentation to create visual magic. For Buddy's silver appearance, makeup artists used aluminum dust mixed into grease paint and sprayed across his skin and face. Under the intense heat of studio lights, particles filled the air around him for hours every day. Tea first. Buddy tried to ignore the symptoms. His throat became irritated. Breathing felt heavier. Coughing fits started interrupting filming. Crew members reportedly assumed it was exhaustion or a mild reaction to the makeup. But Buddy feared speaking up too soon. Actors under the old studio system had very little power, and major productions moved fast. Complaining could get someone labeled difficult. Worse, it could cost him a role entirely. So he kept working. But inside his body, the damage was becoming severe. According to accounts later shared by Buddy and confirmed by Kiki, the aluminum powder had begun coating his lungs. His breathing became dangerously restricted. One night, shortly after returning home from filming, Buddy collapsed. His condition worsened so rapidly that he was rushed to the hospital, where doctors placed him inside an oxygen tent to keep him alive. For weeks, he struggled to recover. And while Buddy lay in a hospital bed fighting to breathe, MGM made a cold business decision. The production could not stop for one actor. The studio replaced him with Jack Haley, redesigned the makeup using a safer aluminum paste instead of powder, and resumed filming. Scenes Buddy had already completed were discarded. His voice recordings for songs were removed. In the final film, almost nothing remained of his work. Imagine what that must have felt like. You believe you're about to star in a movie that could define your career. Then suddenly you're hospitalized, replaced, and watching the production continue without you as though you had never been there at all. And according to Kiki, the emotional impact stayed with her father for years. But perhaps even more frustrating was the way the story was publicly handled afterward. MGM reportedly minimized the seriousness of the incident, often describing it as a simple allergic reaction rather than acknowledging the true danger of prolonged aluminum dust exposure. In an era when studios carefully controlled public image, admitting that a major production had nearly killed an actor was the last thing executives wanted. The story faded into rumor. For decades, many movie fans either never heard about Buddy Ebsen's experience or assumed it had been exaggerated. Meanwhile, The Wizard of Oz became one of the most celebrated films in American history, airing on television year after year and becoming deeply woven into American culture. Children grew up watching The Tin Man without realizing another actor had originally suffered for the role. And yet, despite everything, Buddy Ebsen refused to let the experience destroy him. That may be the most remarkable part of this entire story. A lot of performers would have left Hollywood completely after being humiliated and physically broken by a major studio production. But he didn't. He returned to performing. He worked on radio, stage productions, and smaller film roles. The road back wasn't glamorous, and there were years where success felt uncertain. But he kept moving forward. Then came another turning point in the 1950s. Walt Disney cast Buddy in Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. The project gave audiences a chance to reconnect with his natural charm and screen presence. Slowly, his career regained momentum. And then, in 1962, everything changed forever when he was cast as Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies. The the series exploded into a phenomenon. Critics initially mocked the show, calling it silly and unrealistic. But audiences loved it. Week after week, millions of Americans tuned in to watch the Clampett family navigate Beverly Hills society after striking oil and becoming unexpectedly wealthy. Buddy's calm, lovable performance as Jed became the emotional center of the show. Suddenly, the man Hollywood once pushed aside became one of the most recognizable faces on television. And there's something poetic about that. The actor who nearly disappeared inside a metal costume eventually became famous for playing a character who felt deeply human, kind, patient, humble, and impossible not to like. Viewers trusted Buddy Ebsen because there was sincerity in him that couldn't be manufactured. According to Kiki, that same sincerity existed off-camera too. Away from Hollywood, Buddy valued family more than fame. He loved painting, music, sailing, and spending time with his children. Even after decades in entertainment, he reportedly remained grateful for every opportunity life gave him, perhaps because he understood how quickly success could disappear. And maybe that perspective explains why he carried so little bitterness about The Wizard of Oz. He could have spent the rest of his life angry at MGM, angry at the role he lost, angry that another actor became immortalized as the Tin Man, while his own suffering became a forgotten Hollywood anecdote. But instead, Buddy focused on continuing forward. That resilience became one of the greatest lessons he passed down to Kiki. During one emotional story she later shared publicly, Kiki remembered feeling overwhelmed before a recital early in her career. Sensing her anxiety, Buddy took her outside and pointed toward the night sky. He reminded her that everyone is just a speck on a speck on a speck in the universe. Somehow, hearing that from her father made her fear disappear. IT wasn't about making problems feel meaningless. It was about remembering that setbacks aren't the end of the story. And if anyone understood setbacks, it was Buddy Ebsen. Because when you step back and look at his life as a whole, it becomes clear that the Tin Man incident was never truly the end of his Hollywood story. In some strange way, it may have revealed who he really was. A survivor. Someone capable of enduring disappointment, reinvention, and uncertainty without losing his optimism or identity. Today, generations continue discovering Buddy Ebsen through reruns, classic films, and stories shared by his family. But for many fans, learning what happened behind the scenes of The Wizard of Oz changes the way they see old Hollywood entirely. The glamour was real, but so were the dangers. The smiles on screen often hid painful realities behind the camera, and Buddy Ebsen's story stands as one of the clearest examples of that hidden side of Hollywood history. And maybe that's why Buddy Ebsen's story still resonates all these decades later. Because this isn't just a story about The Wizard of Oz. It's not even just a story about old Hollywood. It's a story about what happens when someone gets knocked down in the most brutal way possible and refuses to disappear. Think about it. Most actors spend their entire careers hoping for one role that changes everything. Buddy Ebsen got that chance, and then watched it slip away while lying in a hospital bed struggling to breathe. The movie became immortal. The character became iconic. And for years, most audiences never even knew his name was attached to it. That kind of experience could destroy a person, but Buddy didn't let it destroy him. Instead of becoming bitter, he rebuilt himself. Slowly, quietly, patiently, until one day, millions of Americans welcomed him into their homes every week as Jed Clampett. And that's what makes his journey so remarkable. Not the tragedy, but what came after it. Because the truth is, Buddy Ebsen's greatest role may not have been the Tin Man at all, that it may have been the role he played in real life. The man who kept moving forward after Hollywood nearly broke him. And when you hear Kiki Ebsen talk about her father today, you realize something important. She doesn't remember him as a victim. She remembers him as someone full of humor, curiosity, warmth, and gratitude. Someone who taught his children to keep chasing what they love no matter how difficult life becomes. That's a legacy bigger than any movie. In many ways, Buddy Ebsen became proof that failure, even public failure, isn't always the ending people think it is. Sometimes the moment that looks like the end of a dream is actually the beginning of a completely different story. A better one. A longer-lasting one. And honestly, there's something poetic about the fact that the man once covered in silver dust eventually became remembered for something much more human. Not a costume, not makeup, not a Hollywood illusion, but perseverance. Today, The Wizard of Oz is still considered one of the greatest films ever made. But behind the magic, behind the music, and behind the yellow brick road, there's another story. One about sacrifice, survival, and a man audiences almost forgot. Until now, the next time you watch the Tin Man on screen, remember this. Another actor wore that costume first. Another actor suffered for that role. And another actor quietly survived one of the darkest behind-the-scenes stories in classic Hollywood history. And somehow, against all odds, he still found his happy ending. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more untold Hollywood stories, forgotten scandals, and the real history behind some of America's biggest stars, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because some of the most fascinating stories in entertainment history are the ones hidden behind the spotlight.